Her murder is actually captured on camera, and yet her killer has never been caught. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Leah Rowlands. Viewer discretion is advised. This case takes us to a small town in Nebraska called Cozad. That is where 41-year-old Leah Rowlands had recently moved to. Leah was born on September 25th, 1955. And she was actually born in Exeter, Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is where she grew up and went to high school and graduated high school. After all of that, she would also make her home in New Jersey at one point. She lived in Arkansas for some time. Leah was actually one of, I think, 12 total siblings. She had a really, really big family. She would end up having 2 children with a previous relationship. By the time this case happens, she's no longer with the father of her 2 kids. So in 1995, she would relocate her and her 2 kids to the town or the city of Brady, Nebraska. And then about a year or so after that, she moves to Cozad, Nebraska, because she wanted to be closer to her boyfriend at the time. She had done work primarily at like gas stations and convenience stores, and when she moved to Cozad, she also got a job at the Amoco gas station. This particular gas station was just off of Interstate 80, a popular, very busy road, and so a lot of traffic would come into that station. And Cozad is not exactly known as a place with a lot of crime. It's a very small little area. That general area had a population at the time of about 4,000 people, and that was about it. It was one of those communities back then where everybody knew everyone. You know, you weren't really a stranger to anyone, except for maybe people who are driving down Interstate 80 just to pop into a gas station from time to time. Other than that, you pretty much knew everyone. Leah was known as a very, very hardworking person. She was not someone who slacked off at work. She would pick up people's shifts. She was always eager and willing to help wherever she could and however she could. She wanted to just make a solid income to support her family. She was an incredibly devoted mom. Her 2 children meant everything to her. I mean, it's why she does what she does. She wanted to make money to make sure they could live a decent life. She was reliable, she was kind, and customer service she excelled at beyond anything. And by the time this case occurred, she had literally just been promoted to a store manager position. And on this particular evening, this was her very first shift as one of the store managers there. It would be her first, and sadly, it would also be her last. Sometime in the late morning or early afternoon of March 10th, 1997, a customer would walk into the Amoco station. And it's no longer the Amoco station there, so the photo you're seeing here is just of a different gas station, but in the exact same spot. And you can see, even today, it's a very rural, very kind of just, I don't know, empty-ish area. A lot of, it looks like a lot of like emptiness and fields and stuff in one direction. But a customer walks in, and at first they don't see anyone. They don't see the clerk. They don't see any employees, no other customers. And then when they peek over the counter, they find a nightmare. A woman is on the ground in a pool of blood. So 911 is called, and when they arrive with fire and ambulance, they're unable to save this individual. She is deceased. This woman had been shot to death, and she would soon be identified as 41-year-old mother Leah Rowlands. Now, unfortunately, there were no witnesses who were even there when this would have happened. They determined it happened sometime just before 10:30 in the morning that same day. But when this all occurred, it was literally just Leah and the person who killed her, and that's it. So no one was even at the gas pumps pumping gas or anything. This was a very quiet morning. And thankfully, the cameras at the gas station worked, and they were pretty decent quality for being, 1997, of course. And when police looked at the footage, they were shocked and also kind of grateful because the entire thing was caught on camera. Just before 10:30 in the morning, a man walks into the gas station. He is a white male, and he is very obviously barefoot. He is walking around with no shoes. Now, when he enters the store, there are 2 other customers. It looks like it was 2 people who were there together. they were wandering around, and these two customers were walking around. They went up to the register to purchase something. They then left. Now, while they're in there, looking around purchasing, the barefoot man is walking around sort of aimlessly. And it looks like he is kind of casing the joint. It looks as if he is just waiting for those customers to leave, and then they do. After those two customers left, the barefoot man, he takes a bottle of soda off the shelf, cracks it open, and starts drinking it right there. He is then seen slowly approaching the counter where Leah Rowlands is still standing behind, and it's clear that they're having some kind of brief conversation, and at this point it's believed he is asking her for, give me all the money, or whatever he may have said. There's no audio, obviously. And the camera picks up her opening the register, taking out all the cash that's in there, giving it to the man. They determined it was roughly $150. $150. That's it. When he got the cash and put it away, he then is seen talking to Leah more, and it appears that he is instructing her to do something. And so the camera picks her up lying on the ground. So obviously this man told her to lie down. He then reaches over the counter, and there is an actual image of this. He climbs over it. He points the 9mm handgun at her, and he just fires. He fired 3 rounds directly into Leah. She had been shot twice in her arm and once through her head. The headshot, obviously, is what killed her instantly. The killer then sort of calmly walks out with the cash he stole. He appears to go pump gas into his car, which equaled about $17 worth of gas. He stole the soda, and he stole a pack of cigarettes, and then he left. Now, also thankfully, his vehicle was also captured on camera. It's not the clearest of images, but they believe it's a red 2-door Pontiac Grand Am model. The model years are, they think, sometime between 1990-ish and 1995 or so. It had shiny chrome wheels. They also noticed that there was no front license plate on it. He had taken it off, and then the camera did pick up the back end license plate, but it was so blurry that they couldn't even make out a single number or letter. They were able to tell, however, that the car license plate, it was a California plate. So there is that. Now, in terms of the surveillance footage from within the gas station, obviously most of the shots are from afar, and so it turns out, they're going to be pretty blurry, and you're not going to get the greatest look at him. However, you can see, his attire pretty clearly, and when he is at the counter, especially when he is leaning over and firing at her, you can see his face pretty damn clear. The man was described as a white male in his early 20s, about 6'3" tall, and weighing approximately 200 to maybe 220 pounds or so. He had no glasses on. He was wearing a black or gray hooded sweatshirt and a dark leather bomber jacket. Like I said, he was barefoot at the time, and he was wearing jogging pants, and it looks like the jogging pants he had scrunched up to his knees. Her body was discovered sometime between, they think, 30 to 45 minutes or so after the shooting happened, but they know her time of death was around 10:30 a.m. Leah's death really, it shook the community pretty hard, because this is a small town. Like I said, everyone knows everyone type of town. And this kind of thing happening there, it was just so unusual. They didn't have violent crime there. And if this was a person who was driving down Interstate 80 and it wasn't a local, because it doesn't sound like anyone recognizes him, they put his image there out on the, the local news, they put it in the newspaper. And they got tips from time to time, but none of those tips led to anything. But if he was a stranger who was just going down Interstate 80, the odds of finding this man are going to be pretty damn slim. I don't know if they have any other forensic evidence, like fingerprints or DNA or that kind of thing. It doesn't sound like they have much of anything other than the camera footage. But obviously this puts strikes of fear in the entire community, because is this guy going to come back and do it again? I mean, the convenience store had to reopen. I mean, it's a small business there that the owner needed to make money still, and so he had to put employees there. Were they going to be safe? No one knew. There has been belief that if the man was walking in there barefoot, that he may be homeless, but also he has a car, and so they don't know if maybe he's a homeless guy who sleeps in his car. At the time, it was a relatively newer model vehicle, so this was like an old car. Or maybe he just was a barefoot kind of guy, He just did everything barefoot. And because they can't see the license plate number, they can't put it in to see if maybe this was a stolen vehicle. Maybe he stole the car somewhere else, drove it down to Interstate 80, got to the gas station, stole some money, and killed her. It's a relatively, it's a car that once you put it out on the news, you think people, if someone in that small area recognized it, they would probably come forward pretty quickly, but no one ever did. They also don't know. Maybe this is a local that people just don't recognize. And if that's the case, was this someone who knew Leah? Obviously, we can't see what they're saying on camera to each other. She did not appear to be in any kind of fear of him until he pulled out the gun. But did he target her specifically? Who knows? I mean, more than likely not, but there is always a chance that maybe. However, the odds is that this was just a random dude who went to a random gas station, robbed it for whatever money it had, and for some reason decided to kill the clerk and then left. I'm guessing the reason why he killed her was because, well, he wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't doing anything to hide his face. And so she could, potentially describe him to people. He probably didn't know or realize that there was a camera in there and that it was staring right at him. Because if you knew there's cameras there that can pick up your face, there's no point of killing the clerk just to keep them silent when there's a camera who sees you. So either he didn't know there was a camera, or he just didn't care. He just wanted to kill her. Which begs the question, is this guy a serial killer? I mean, he did this so brazenly. It was in the morning. It was bright as day outside. He walks in, and it's not like he's not going to go unnoticed. He's a guy who's barefoot. People are going to see that. He walks around, and he opens up a bottle of Coke and starts drinking it before paying for it. He then just sort of casually walks up to the counter and says, "Give me all your money," without any hesitation. And then he shoots and kills her. This is clearly a man who didn't really care at all. And that's why I think maybe this guy has done it before, because of just how simple it was for him, how easy it was for him. It was like nothing to him. And that's just makes me wonder, could he have done more? Leah Rowlands was a loving and kind mother to 2 teenagers. She was at a point in her life where she was trying to kind of turn her life around, get settled for once, and just sort of put her life back together. Her life wasn't in disarray or anything, but with a move to a new state and all that, and trying to move around with her 2 kids, it's just, sometimes it can get hard to settle down, and she was finally starting to do that. And then this thing happened. No one's really at fault here other than the killer. I mean, the person who owned the gas station and Leah and all them, this was always a safe community. No one would ever think that this kind of thing would necessarily happen to them. This was just such a shocking event. And to have him on camera, especially, and not know who he is, that's insane. And so I think maybe the hope is that if his image is out there now, because it's a pretty, like I said, it's a relatively clear image. You're seeing it here. So it's not like it's a totally blurry thing. You can make out enough features to go, oh, okay, I kind of recognize that guy. He probably would look relatively similar today, obviously just much older. So this case would also be featured on the show America's Most Wanted. And they had filmed there locally. They filmed at the gas station, and they did, the whole, if you have any information, please call this number. And they ended up getting several tips. A lot of people would call in after the episode aired, which I think tends to happen a lot with the, old America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries. You're going to get a lot of calls, a lot of tips, and most of them are nothing. And unfortunately, in this case, all of the tips and leads led to nothing. They were right back to square one. They bring her story up, I think probably every year on the local news there, so that people don't forget Leah, don't forget that she was a victim, and don't forget that her killer has not been caught. There's also a good chance that her killer has technically been caught, and maybe he is in prison somewhere else. Because again, if this was something he would, like I said, he seemed so unbothered by this entire process about robbing her, shooting her. He didn't really seem to care about being noticed, even though he killed the witness. My gut tells me he had done this at least a few times before, or maybe he did it a few times after. This could have been the first one. Who knows? But maybe he has done something similar to this, maybe somewhere in the general area of where this happened, and maybe he did get caught. And so putting his image out there, his image from 1997 at least, hopefully that could help jostle some people's memories, because someone somewhere out there has got to know the truth. Someone somewhere out there has got to know who this man is. Perhaps that someone is you. Again, at the time this happened, the man was in his early to mid 20s. He was a white male, about 6'2" to 6'3", somewhere between 200 to 220 pounds. He is someone who liked to potentially walk around barefoot, and he drove a two-door red Pontiac Grand Am with California plates on it. Somebody might know that. Somebody might go, oh my God, that's so-and-so. I'm sure by this time that car has probably been destroyed or sold or something, but maybe someone remembers someone driving a car like that in 1997 around this area in Nebraska who fits the description of the guy, you see in the images. Killers like to talk. Killers brag. They think it's fun sometimes, especially when they're high or they're drunk. They'll like to spill the beans to someone. And maybe you know something and you've been afraid to come forward because you're afraid he might kill you, just given how just so unbothered he was by killing Leah. He may be just as unbothered killing you. Well, you can always report information anonymously. You do not have to say who you are. They just need to know what you know. And that needs to lead to capturing this monster. If you have any information on the murder of Leah Rowlands, please contact the Cozad Police Department at 308-784-2366 or the Nebraska State Patrol at 308-535-8047 or the Dawson County Sheriff's Office at 308-324-3011. Again, just pick the one you want to call, and you can give them the information you have. And perhaps the information you have, even if it's just the tiniest, smallest thing that you think is insignificant, may be humongous to them. So if you saw something, if you know something, please say something. Help Leah and her family get the justice for her that she very rightfully deserves. When the daughter-in-law of the founder of U-Haul is found murdered inside her home, the big question was this a hired hit, or was this something completely random? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Ava Shoen. Viewer discretion is advised. It was August 6th, 1990 in Telluride, Colorado, where at the time it had a population of about 1,200 or so people. Pretty small little community. But on that August 6, 1990 day, that little town would be rocked by something pretty huge and something pretty sad. A little girl would end up calling 911 and to report that her mother was dead. And this is that 911 call.
Hi, Mom. I woke up to terrible screaming. What is your name? Dr. Shoen. I live in the ski ranches. I'm up this log house. There was blood on the bed. Please send somebody.
The little girl said that her mom, Ava Shoen, had been shot, or it looked like had been shot, at the top of the stairs of their home. This was pretty early in the morning. The girls woke up and they went outside to play with their dog, and they said they wanted to go show their mom a new trick they taught the dog. So they run back into the house and they run up the stairs looking for their mom, and they find her dead on the stairs. Once they called 911, they then kind of ran out of the house screaming, and they managed to flag down a passing motorist on a road that was kind of far away because where the house was really desolate. It was not surrounded by other homes, and so the road was pretty far away. The police and ambulance eventually arrive, and Ava Shoen is pronounced dead at the scene. She did have a single gunshot wound to her head. When they are examining the house, they see that in Ava Shoen's bedroom, there is blood on the sheets. There is also what appeared to be a portion of the sheet had been ripped off, and they didn't really understand why. The rest of the sheet, though, had that blood stain on it, and so it appeared that Ava Shoen had been shot while she was in her bed, and that she managed to get up and walk towards the staircase, but then she fell to the ground, collapsed, and died. According to the two girls, they said that sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning, they thought they heard a thump and then another thump a few seconds later, but they didn't really know what it was. They never left their bedroom to see, and they just went back to bed. They did determine that Ava Shoen had not been dead for like a few minutes or anything like that. She had been dead for a few hours. So that time frame of about 2 a.m. probably sounded pretty accurate as to when she actually died. The rest of the house was in pretty decent condition. There was a couple of drawers in the bedroom that had been pulled out, so they weren't sure if someone was like looking for something, but if they were planning to rob the house, there was this really expensive necklace. I think it was a pearl necklace or something, literally hanging on the bed right underneath or right on above where Ava had been laying in bed, and they didn't steal it. There wasn't any stolen wallets or stolen cash. There wasn't anything prominent stolen from the house whatsoever. Ava Shoen wasn't sexually assaulted. There was no forced entry in the home, no kicked in doors, no cut screens, no broken windows, nothing. And so police were having a really difficult time figuring out why exactly this happened. What was the motive here? And what made it even more intriguing is the fact that the Shoen residence, like I said earlier, is in this really desolate location surrounded by a bunch of trees. It's not really a house you can see from like off the road. It's just kind of hidden. And so it made people wonder, like, was this a planned murder? Was Ava targeted specifically and someone had entered their home with the intention of killing her? That was a very strong possibility. Then police would find out something else. Ava Shoen was married. She was married to a man named Sam Shoen. Sam Shoen was actually in Phoenix, Arizona when the murder occurred. He had been contacted in Phoenix once they found out his wife was killed, and he drove back to Colorado ASAP, and he got there pretty quickly. They had found out that Sam Shoen had left prior to the murder happening, and this was confirmed because the girls saw their mom alive after Sam had left. They confirmed also that Sam had been pulled over by a highway police officer on his way to Phoenix because he drove there in his wife's car. And it confirms that he was nowhere even remotely close to the scene of the murder. And so he himself was cleared of physically committing the murder. But who is Sam Shoen and who is Ava Shoen? That's where this potential conspiracy comes into play. Sam Shoen is the son, the oldest son, to a man named L.S. Shoen. In 1945, L.S. Shoen, who had just come back from fighting in the war, well, he needed to pick up and move his family. He had a pretty large family. He didn't have a lot of money to hire movers and all of this stuff, and so he came up with this concept of moving yourself. And this was something that wasn't done very often back then, and this would lead to him creating the company U-Haul. L.S. Shoen is the creator, the founder of U-Haul, which has been open since 1945. This coincided with a lot of people who were coming back from the war, and families were relocating and moving, and there was not a lot of money out there, and so there was this desire for the do-it-yourself move, and L.S. Shoen really capitalized on that. He wasn't expecting it to take off, but it took off. Like, it obviously, U-Haul is still around today, and one of the biggest companies in the country. And it started off as like this small type of company, but it very quickly, rapidly spread, and it started to make him a lot of money. Soon, that's when like the moving truck came into play, the moving vans later would follow. Obviously, they now have multiple different types of moving vehicles. LS was happily married to a woman named Anna Mary. They had their first son, Sam, but then over the years, they would end up having quite a large family. At some point, LS and Anna Mary would move their family to Phoenix, Arizona, and then Anna Mary, she kind of suddenly passed from heart failure. And so LS was left behind to raise all the kids and run this company, but he would, later on remarry, and then he and his new wife would end up having a bunch more kids. This was a gigantic family, and there were a lot of kids in this family. But luckily, they grew up with the success of U-Haul, and so money was never truly an issue in this family. This quickly became a billion-dollar enterprise. And LS's intention were for eventually his 7 sons and 5 daughters, 12 kids, to eventually take over the business. That was his plan. He would basically give them a large U-Haul stock. He would give them a part of the U-Haul stock when they were each born. And, one day, he planned to have all of them running it. By 1980, he would end up turning 92% of the company over to his children who were still involved in the business. And 6 years later, a couple of his kids had attempted a coup and attempted to kick LS, their father, out of the business. And there would be a majority of the 12 children would end up, because basically you ended up having 2 sides here. You had the siblings who were on board with kicking LS out of the company and completely removing him from all of it. The guy who founded the business and made them successful. Great kids. And then there was the minority of the children who were on LS's side. On November 8th, 1986, they voted, and the majority of the children voted to completely remove LS as president and CEO of U-Haul. Eventually, LS, along with his oldest son, Sam, and a couple other of the children would end up suing the kids who turned on them and started this whole coup. And this was a lawsuit to regain ownership of the company. Sam Shoen, he initially never really wanted to be involved in the U-Haul business. I think he was going to medical school at one point. He being the oldest son, the first born in this entire family, LS actually intended for Sam to become the CEO of the company, but Sam never really did because that's just not what he wanted to do. Eventually, Sam would marry Ava Shoen and they would have 2 children together. Ava Berg was actually born on March 14th, 1946, and she was originally from the town of Larvik in Norway. And she was considered just a really nice person. She was very active. Her and Sam were always going out hiking and doing a lot of physical activity outside. They kept in good shape. And Ava was just an awesome mom. She absolutely adored her 2 children. She also loved animals. They had several dogs as well. Ava didn't have any genuine connection to the whole U-Haul saga other than being married to Sam, who was in the middle of this lawsuit of suing his siblings. So when Sam is told about what happened to his wife, Ava, he immediately tells police about this whole saga with him and his siblings and his dad with U-Haul. That led to the speculation of, was this a hit? Was this someone trying to silence Sam? Was the target supposed to be Sam, but he wasn't there, and Ava became the target? The thing is almost nobody knew that Sam was doing this trip to Phoenix. It was a last-minute impromptu trip that he had to take, because that's where the headquarters to U-Haul was. It was in Phoenix, Arizona. The LS had moved it there to where I live, Phoenix. But it wasn't on any kind of docket. It wasn't in the books. It was very sudden trip he had to take. That's why he thought that maybe he was the target. He was supposed to be the one shot and killed that day and his theory was, and this is LS believed this as well, 2 of LS's sons, the main ones behind the coup at U-Haul, and those 2 were Mark and Joe Shoen. LS believed that the 2 of them were responsible for this murder. Maybe not directly, but more than likely indirectly. That maybe they hired someone to kill Sam because of this feud. LS goes on the news and he says they're fully capable of doing that. They are fully, his own children, he is saying, are fully capable of pulling off an execution or an assassination of this type in order to get their way, in order to get people to shut up and move on from this lawsuit and let them have control of the company. So police had no choice but to go interview Mark and Joe Shoen because of all these allegations. But Mark and Joe were not being helpful whatsoever. They would not talk to police. They would not cooperate. They barely spoke to police at all. They didn't allow any of the employees of U-Haul to have conversations with police. And that made all of it sound really suspicious. Like, you're not going to talk to us. You don't want anyone to talk to us. You're ordering people not to talk to us, despite people saying that they think this may have been you, and you're going to say silence. You know, it seemed really suspicious to police and to the rest of the family. It also kind of tracked with the fact that they didn't know that Sam was going to be out of town and that they had sent this potential hitman to enter the home and kill him. But why would the hitman kill Ava if he didn't see Sam there? Did Ava interrupt him? Did Ava see him when she wasn't supposed to? And that's why this potential hitman killed her. But they weren't cooperating with police, the brothers, and the rest of the siblings weren't. And so they really couldn't do much. Police, they couldn't even really get a warrant to compel them to talk, or a warrant to search any of their properties or anything, because they didn't have any evidence to show that they were ones responsible for this. Sam puts out a reward offer of $250,000 to anyone who has information to find out who killed his wife, the mother of his children. Sam and his 2 kids moved out of the house that day. They never went back to that home ever again. And this devastated and completely destroyed their family. I mean, this really ruined them, especially since Sam he thought his own family did this. And outside of that, police didn't really have much. They had a shell casing found at the crime scene, and there weren't any fingerprints. There was no DNA left behind. There was no no blood that wasn't Ava's. There wasn't any hair samples. There was nothing. The only thing they ever got was a witness said they thought they saw a white Jeep Cherokee driving on the road around the Shoen house, kind of back and forth a few times that night. But that's it. No one ever knew who drove that car. No one had ever seen it before. And nobody knew who the owner was, and they were never found. Like I said, Sam was ruled out as a suspect. They looked into his finances to see if maybe he hired someone to do this. But there was no motive for him to have his wife killed. They were in a really happy marriage. They were both very involved in their kids' lives. There was nothing they could find to suggest that Sam had hired someone to do this. And so he was just completely ruled out. Eventually, the show airs on Unsolved Mysteries first in December of 1992. And they did not get any hits. They didn't get anything from that episode. I mean, they got some tips and stuff like they always get, but nothing was substantial, and none of it panned out to anything or anyone. They then rebroadcast the case in 1994. This time, they do get a very prominent phone call. A man named Kelly Lemons calls the police there in Colorado and says, "I think I know who killed Ava Shoen, and I'm pretty sure it was my brother-in-law." The brother-in-law of Kelly Lemons was 38-year-old Frank Marquis. Frank Marquis was a known criminal. He had served time for burglary and for rapes throughout the 80s, several of them. When the murder of Ava Shoen occurred, he was out on parole. He was confirmed to be in Telluride, Colorado. He wasn't living there, but he was there at that time frame. Frank Marquis was working at an auto repair shop. He was a mechanic in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But he had traveled to Telluride, Colorado, I think with a friend. When the episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired and Kelly Lemons had called police, he then is working with police to see if he can get a recording of Frank Marquis on the phone of talking about the Unsolved Mysteries episode, because Frank Marquis had boasted and bragged about it the first time the episode aired in 92, that he was responsible for the murder of Ava Shoen, but no one really took it seriously. But after it re-aired again, that's when, the brother-in-law was like, I'm going to call police. So he ends up calling Frank Marquis. This time the phone call is recorded, and this is that call.
Kelly.
Yeah.
Hey, Frank.
Hey.
What's happening?
Hey, that show was on again. They had it on Unsolved Mysteries again.
Well, don't worry about it.
You sure you can't trace nothing back to you?
Absolutely.
gun, no nothing, right?
Nothing. I don't want to talk about this.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
So he says he wasn't worried at all about the Unsolved Mysteries episode. He was really confident and cocky about it. He said, I've covered up all of it. He actually tells them that, he says, I think to Mr. Lemons, that he ended up cutting off a piece of the sheet from Ava Shoen's bed sheet because he had gotten his own blood on it. This tracks and lines up with the crime scene, that there was this mysterious section of the white sheet cut off. No one really knew that. Police also look into the whereabouts. They want to confirm he was in Telluride, and they found out that on both August 5th and August 6th, he was supposed to be at work in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but he called off both days. The boss of the auto repair shop told detectives that he ends up finding out that he didn't call off because he was sick. He called off because Frank Marquis and a friend named Jeff Beal, Jeff Beal is pictured here, the two of them had gone to Telluride in Colorado because there was a music festival going on. So police reach out to Jeff Beal. Jeff Beal confirms that on August 5th and August 6th of 1990, the two of them were definitely in Telluride. So they can now place Frank Marquis there in Telluride for sure during the time of the murder. Jeff Beal would then later tell police that on the night of the murder, Frank Marquis was out all night long with the car, and that Frank Marquis had borrowed a gun from a coworker. He ends up, after the murder happens, Frank Marquis gives the gun back to the coworker, and there are some rounds missing. And Frank Marquis says, yeah, I had used it to shoot a dog. When police are able to collect the gun, it's a .25 caliber. So the ammunition they found at the house was actually a .25 caliber. And then the .25 caliber handgun that they were able to retrieve from the coworker, they were able to confirm it was the same type of weapon that would have been used to shoot and kill Ava Shoen. However, there was damage to the gun, and it looked like someone had deliberately scratched the barrel in order to hide any kind of the striations and stuff that would happen when you fire a round from a gun. They can tell, they can line it up. We all seen it on, forensic files. But because of the damage in the gun, which they felt was deliberate, they weren't able to confirm that this was the exact gun that was used. So on July 20th, 1993, after they've done a very extensive investigation into Frank Marquis, they have the recorded phone call, they have the gun, they have the confirmation he was in Telluride. They have plenty of evidence on him, and so they arrest him in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he was brought back to Colorado and was put on a $1 million bond. He initially denies having anything to do with the murder of Ava Shoen. He says, I didn't do it, I wasn't there, not me. In February of 1994, police are still looking into this. They re-speak to his friend, Mr. Beal, and Mr. Beal says that around the time that the murder would have happened, they were driving around, and he remembers that Frank Marquis took clothing he had been wearing the day prior and he threw it out of the car. Well, Mr. Beal remembers where that was. And so, by a miracle, Mr. Beal is able to bring police back to the location where they threw the clothes out of the window. They're still there. They're decayed. I mean, they've been there for a little bit of time, and they've been weathered and whatnot, but they were able to collect those items. They went over each piece of clothing with a fine-tooth comb, and they actually found a strand of human hair. That strand of human hair would be confirmed to be Ava Shoen's hair. And they were able to confirm that those clothing items belonged to Frank Marquis, giving further evidence that he did this. In October of 1994, police represent more information to him, and he finally caves in and he confesses. This right here is a part of that confession.
I walk in, and there was maybe a little light in the kitchen. I go towards the bedroom to see if anybody's in there. As I'm listening, I'm not hearing anything. So I slowly open the door. Mrs. Shoen is sitting up in bed, reading a book. She was fighting me, and she was turning away, and I pushed her with this hand as she was turning back, and the gun went off.
He says that there were other houses kind of nearby, and he would end up breaking into and burglarizing at least one or two other homes, which police would go back to those homes and ask the homeowners, hey, were you robbed these nights? Were things stolen? Both homes said, yep, we were robbed that night, and these are the items that were taken. And they were the same exact items that Frank Marquis had told police he had stolen. So they have confirmation again that his story is lining up with what he did that night. He then says he came across the Shoen house and he walked inside. The door was unlocked. There was no need to break the door down. He then walked into the bedroom. He wasn't expecting anyone to be there because he figured this is summertime and people tend to not be there during the summer, I guess. Well, he walked into the bedroom where he saw Ava Shoen sitting up in bed reading a book. This caught her by surprise. She screamed, "Hey, get out of my house." But he said he then kind of got up to her and they fought and they struggled. He says during the struggle, he had the gun in his hand and it accidentally went off and he shot Ava Shoen. Police don't believe that, though. Police believe that he probably intended to rape her that night once he saw her, but he couldn't go through with that because he had shot her. But they believe that the gunshot was not accidental, that he did it intentionally because she saw him. However, they don't really have the evidence to say that he fully intended to kill her. They couldn't prove whether or not it was an accident or not. And so he ends up taking a plea deal, unfortunately. He pleads guilty to manslaughter and second-degree burglary, and he was sentenced to a grand total of 24 years in prison. He was released in November of 2011. Ava's husband, Sam, believes that the U-Haul story was still somehow involved in this. Frank Marquis, they looked into him. He had absolutely no connections to any of the siblings in this U-Haul case. They didn't find any phone calls that traced back between, him and people in the U-Haul business. They couldn't find any past connections in terms of relationships. They could not find any connections whatsoever between Frank Marquis and anyone else in this family. But Sam says that based on the autopsy report, not only was Ava shot, they also found 2 different injection wounds on her body. I think it was near her breast. She did not have any medical procedures done at all. She's not someone who needed to take any kind of injections. There was no needles in the house. So they never really were able to explain why she had 2 fresh injection marks on her. And that's where Sam kind of believes that there may still have been something to do with the U-Haul saga. Maybe this is a situation where Frank Marquis, maybe someone hired him to do this, but he came up with this story and lied about it because maybe he's afraid he's going to be killed by anyone else from the U-Haul situation. And so he needed to keep his mouth shut about that part of it. And he had to make up another story because he was caught dead to rights. But again, they really couldn't find anything to corroborate that either. Those injection wounds is a mystery. Did anyone from the U-Haul saga truly have anything to do with the murder? I can't sit here and say absolutely not, but no one can really say absolutely yes either. There is that sliver of chance, but there is no proof to back it up. It sounded like that Ava Shoen was, you have to look at it too from the timing of it, right smack in the middle of this big lawsuit where Sam and his dad and other siblings are trying to sue the other half of the family for control of this billion-dollar company, and all of a sudden one of them ends up dead. And it happens to be on a night when Sam takes an unplanned impromptu trip to Phoenix, Arizona. He was supposed to be home that night. It does make you wonder. It does make you kind of question the timing. It makes you question. It is very suspicious, but again, there's just no proof. And at this point, police consider this case closed and done with. From what I understand, I was reading there was with the lawsuit, I think the lawsuit ended up awarding LS and that side of the family over $1 billion. However, control of the company was still in, I think, Joe's control, Mark and Joe's control. I think Joe is, at least at some point, was still heading the company. And he had been running the company ever since the coup, kicking his dad out of it. Which, That's a shitty thing to do, by the way. Hi, your dad started that company from scratch. Like, he did that. He did that. He invested all of this time and money, and he gave his kids the riches and the fortune that they would end up making. He did that. And they would be like, f you, and they kicked him out of the company. Like, that's some bullshit. Like, ugh. That's just, ugh. In the end, Ava Shoen, I hope, and I hope there isn't more to this and that there really is no connection to the U-Haul thing, but hopefully in the end, Ava Shoen got the justice that she rightfully deserved.
Do you have any weapons? Hello? Hello?
Ultimately, it would be his foot that was his downfall. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Richard Tommy Smith. Viewer discretion is advised. Richard Thomas Smith, who would go by Tommy to everyone, he was born on August 18th, 1970 in Peoria, Illinois. And it sounds like Illinois is pretty much where he lived his entire life. I don't really have a lot of background information on him, unfortunately. His mom would describe him, though, as just the neatest kid a mother could have, the best son a mother could have. He was one of 3 kids. He also had 2 sisters. Throughout the entirety of his life, he was always this kind and caring individual. Such an incredibly loving young man. Sure, he got mad from time to time, but they said even when he's mad, he still somehow remained kind. He isn't someone who ever really showed much of a temper. Tommy would have been a really great husband, and he would have been an incredible father. But those things never got to happen for Tommy. Tommy was actually engaged, and that was to a 19-year-old Jennifer Logsden. Jennifer lived with a roommate in Peoria, Illinois, and the roommate, her name was Casey Johnson. And I believe Casey at the time this happened was 17 years old. It was July 19th, 1991. That day, Tommy, Jennifer, and Casey were hanging out. They had come back to the apartment that Casey and Jennifer shared together, and Tommy obviously joined them. They would at one point leave the house to go get some stuff to make like ice cream sundaes or something like that back at their house. They get back. They pop on a movie. There is a Stephen King movie, I guess, that's showing. And so what they would do is, this is obviously before every room in the house had a television in it, they would actually take their mattress from the bedroom and they would drag it out to the living room, move the couches around, and all 3 of them would lay on the mattress and watch the movie. Slowly but surely, one by one, each one of them would fall asleep. And then, at 3 o'clock in the morning, a sound would jostle the 2 girls awake. When they woke up, they saw Tommy. He seemed to be struggling with someone else in the house. Tommy was trying to fight whoever this was. It was pitch dark in the house. None of the lights were on. The TV wasn't illuminating the room very brightly. Despite the fact that it was dark in the house, the girls were able, or one of the girls was able to see that this assailant had socks over his hands, and he was holding what looked like a knife. Jennifer believed that the man was African American, but it was so dark in the house that she couldn't tell, anyone's skin color just based off of how dark it was in the house. And as Tommy is fighting with this unknown person, all of a sudden you hear Tommy kind of like gurgle almost, or screamed in some kind of pain. And it was later determined that that's because Tommy had been stabbed numerous times by this assailant. While this is all happening, Casey manages to get to the bedroom where their phone is, and she ducks behind a bed and she calls 911. And this is just a few segments from that 911 call.
I can't hear you. You need to hide. What's going on? Huh? An intruder. This person that broke into your house, does he have any weapons? Hello? Hello?
I can't move. My throat is slit.
Who are you?
A lot of blood.
Can you describe this person that did it?
No, I can't.
How about maybe what he was wearing?
I don't remember.
In the background of that call, you can hear a woman screaming, and that's Jennifer. The assailant had now moved on to her and began to attack her. And at one point, he slit her throat. Then the assailant walks throughout the house and finds Casey on the phone with 911. And right there in the middle of the call, he grabs her and he stabs her as well. She had numerous stab wounds, but also she had a slit across her throat. Now, during this attack, when he was going after Casey, the blade of the knife, which had a wooden handle, it bent and it broke off. And then the handle of the knife fell to the ground. Casey sees the assailant pick up the blade of the knife, but not the handle, and then he also stole her purse and he bolted out of the house. Within minutes, police arrive at the home and there is blood everywhere. This was an incredibly vicious attack. Blood sprayed all over the walls. There was blood covering the blankets and pillows. There was blood all over the phone that was used to call 911. The living room that they had been sleeping in was in complete disarray. It was very obvious that a major struggle happened here. Casey and Jennifer are clinging on to life when police and rescue arrive. They are rushed to the hospital where eventually they will recover from their injuries and they would survive. Tommy, however, would not be so lucky. He would be pronounced dead at the scene. He had numerous stab wounds. Tommy died a hero. Tommy died struggling with his assailant and trying to attack him as well. At one point, they believe he grabbed the knife from the assailant and almost stabbed the assailant, but it doesn't look like he actually did. But he fought hard, and if it wasn't for him, those two girls would likely be dead. He died, saving the lives of two people. Now, in terms of the investigation, they weren't really getting much information from the two women because, one, they were still in shock. They were trying to recover from having their throats cut. But also, they really couldn't remember much about the guy. I mean, like I said, it was pitch dark in the house. They think he might have been African-American, but they weren't sure. They could tell that he had socks on because they got pretty close to him at one point where they saw the socks on his hands. But they really didn't have a whole lot of info to provide, unfortunately. They determined that the man entered the home through a window. And it seems like the three individuals who were in the house caught this person by surprise. Like they knew, almost like they knew who lived there, but then didn't know that there was actually a third person there. Which kind of begs the question, was the motive here sexual assault? Because maybe this person knew that it was two women living there. Well, none of the women were sexually assaulted at all. But that could also be because Tommy had woke up just in time to defend the two women, and it all turned into something way worse. The guy did steal a couple of things, including a purse, so perhaps robbery was the motive. Something the girls did tell police, however, was that whoever this man was, they believed he was barefoot, because they did not notice any shoes on him, and they think he had his socks on his hands, so he was barefoot. And that tells police that the killer was likely someone who lived nearby, because you're not going to walk too far without shoes on. I mean, that's not to say it's impossible, but the likelihood is you're not going to be walking across the city looking for a house to rob barefoot. Another piece of evidence they collected from the crime scene was actually, there was a birthday card, I believe, that had been knocked off, probably, I think, where the killer entered. It looks like that's where, when he put his foot down, he stepped on this birthday card. When they took this birthday card and they dusted it, there was clearly some kind of print on it, and it looked like a palm print. And so that it didn't match the palm of either of the two girls, and it did not match the palm print of Tommy. So this might have been from their killer. As the police are investigating, they are also obviously combing the neighborhood, going door to door. And one of the first places they go is the next door neighbor, a man named Gene A. Brown. And what jumped out to police immediately was right before they knocked on his door, they noticed there was a blood stain on his door. And so once Gene answers the door, they ask him, hey, where's that blood? Where'd that come from? And he goes, oh, that's my blood. I cut myself. I cut like on my hand. I cut somewhere on my foot as well. And when they tested that blood, it did in fact match his blood. So at that point, that was truthful. So it got to a point where they wanted to run some palm prints from potential suspects. And Gene Brown, because of the proximity, considering that he was also a black man, and one of the girls said that he may have been African American, but they weren't sure. But he had the same build as their potential suspect. But they're also taking palm prints from other men in the area, other men in their lives. None of the palm prints are matching. And when they take Gene Brown's palm print to run it against the print found on the card, it wasn't a match. They're like, oh, okay, so it's not him. And that's when a crafty, super intelligent forensic person realized that the print they had on that card was not actually a palm print. It was a footprint. Footprints are also unique to each individual, but it's also not a commonly left behind print at a crime scene. But with that information, what they do is they get footprints from some of the people they had been talking to, one of them being Gene Brown. They take the foot impression found at the crime scene and then Gene's foot impression. And this is, by the way, after they had talked to him the first time, he said he had never been in that house. He does not really know the girls, and he had never been in it. So once they take his foot impression along with the card, it's a match. It's the same print. So that now puts him in the crime scene, a place he said he had never been in. And so they bring him in for questioning, and after a short time, he confesses. Once they tell him, we have your foot impression in that house. The cut you said you made on accident, we believe came from the blade of the knife, which, by the way, when they searched Gene's house, they found a bent metal knife blade. They also found his silverware drawer, a cutlery drawer, filled with, spoons, forks, knives, and they found more knives from that same knife set that was used to kill Tommy and attack the two girls. They also collected what they think was blood or some kind of DNA from his hair or from his head. And the DNA that they found on his body matched the victim's. And so they just really gave all of this to him and said, listen, we got the knife blade, we got your foot impression, we've got their DNA on you physically. Like, he didn't even bother to take a shower after he murdered someone and tried to kill two others. He didn't clean up anything. They found the socks. They found everything. And so he sits down and he confesses and says, I did it. And this is part of that interview.
Entered the house and started across the bedroom towards the door leading
I didn't see anyone until I got in the living room. By that time, the guy had jumped me, grabbed my head.
Did you stab him with the knife?
I can't say I stabbed him. So I don't know. We was struggling. It was more or less, he was trying to get the knife, and I was trying to keep the knife, and at the same time, he was being cut.
Did you and he struggle for any length of time?
I'd say about 45 seconds.
What ended the struggle?
He walked away and fell to the floor.
He says that on the night in question, he had done a lot of crack cocaine. And that after he did cocaine, he went to dinner with his wife and child. Then they all went to bed, but then he woke up and he knows that there were two young women living next door to him, these teenagers basically. And so he told police, I needed to, I wanted to rob so I can also buy more cocaine and more drugs. And so he assumed that it was just the two girls there. He opens the window, climbs in that way. He knocks the card off with his foot or his hand. Then he steps on that card. And then when he gets into the living room, he's surprised to see a third person there, a man, Tommy. And he clearly woke Tommy up. And then Tommy immediately went into heroic mode and attacked the guy. But unfortunately, Tommy did not win. Gene tried to say that he didn't actually really stab him. He was just, at one point he says they were fighting with the knife, and at one point while they were fighting with it, Tommy got stabbed. Which, with the type of knife that was used, this wasn't an accidental stabbing. Tommy had been stabbed a number of times, and also, did you also accidentally chase after both girls and slit their throat? No. So, with all of the physical evidence, with the DNA, with the shoe impression, with the confession, they now have everything they need. Gene Brown would end up taking a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He pled guilty to murder and other charges, and he would be sentenced to life in prison without parole. He got additional time for the other charges as well. Gene Brown will never be released from prison. He will die there. And for what? For what? For some money to buy drugs. I wish I could say that this was a rare occasion, but it's not. People have killed for drug money. People have killed for just money in general. People have killed for way less. Thankfully, this is a case where the killer was just so careless. Also, he's probably high, and so he doesn't really think to clean up or hide things. But, thankfully he was bad at this. There could have been 3 victims that night. 3 murder victims, I should say. But thanks to Tommy and his heroics and the love he had for his fiance and, the care he had for Casey as well. They were friends. That fueled him to stand up to this would-be killer. It gave them enough time to call 911 to get police there, even though the 2 girls were eventually attacked. If, he had not woken up and defended the 2 girls, they could probably have been killed first. And so they will be forever grateful for what Tommy did for them. And in the end, Tommy Smith got the justice he very rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case. True crime, a Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the link tree in the description of this video below. I also post compilation videos at the beginning of every month of all of the previous TikTok videos from that previous month here on YouTube. So you can also check it out that way as well. Also in that link tree below, you'll find my case list. The case list is like 7,200 names long now. I typically pick my cases that I cover each time at random. However, if you are a loved one and you would like for me to cover your loved one's case, if they're a missing person or it's an unsolved case, cold case, let me know that you are a loved one. You can email me case recommendations, by the way. My email is listed below. But let me know in the email if you are a loved one, and I can make sure that case gets a higher priority. So, but that is it for this video. And so until the next case, ta-ta for now.